how many years. I looked it up. I tried to find it, and the minutes of those meetings have been relegated to the vault in the basement, so.
Somewhere.
Sandy Welty, not retired, getting there. I'm an attorney practicing here in town, Admiralty and Maritime Law, and I'm a boater, sailor, have a mooring, have been on the Harbor Committee in the past.
Liz?
Hi, I'm Liz, I'm the harbor clerk. I've been with the town for 7 years, and harbor clerk for now 2, almost 3. I work with Steve, and anything you need, I think you've all seen my email, and you'll get my minutes.
And we have a couple of members of the public. Want to introduce yourself, Ramiro?
Yeah, Ramiro Acevedo Ramos, I'm own the Schooner Surprise. I'm just always interested in the harbor.
Of course.
Been here for 20 years, not from here. And yeah, I'm just here to listen to the all.
Welcome.
Bridget Quayle, lived here for close to 40 years.
Thanks, Bridget. Okay, the agenda for today is really a general one, obviously, the first time of the meeting. And one of the key tasks for you all is to, well, first of all, we're going to talk to, you all need to, this is your committee, not ours. And the only reason I'm speaking is because we don't have yet designated a chair and a vice chair. That's your role's responsibility today, first and foremost. You know, the chair is important. It takes a little bit extra time to coordinate. Heard us cats for these meetings and for the activities, but it's it's a lot of fun. And Richard can speak to it. If he wants to add anything to it, he's been chair for a number of years of the committee. Vice chair would take the place of the chair in the absence of the chair. So that would be the first order of business. Second would be for you, once you get there, is to talk about when you decide you'd like to meet. We historically have done it at 7:30 on a Thursday morning here, and it will be here going forward because of the videoing requirement. But this doesn't have to be. That's your decision. Frequency of meetings is your decision. Classically, it's been once a month, right, Richard? About once every month, which is very standard pretty much for committees, but it doesn't have to be. That's, again, all your decisions.
Unless it's the planning board.
Well, Mark can speak to that. The next activity would be for you all to start talking about what is important to all of us. That's the committee work plan. Basically, what you all want to recommend to the select board that you are working on to get approval from the select board on that activity. Reason is, and it's discussed in the document was sent out, is because we want to make sure that committees, the select board is aware of the categories of information that you're working on, because that's what the committee is for. It's working at the behest of the select board to help us to make more quality decisions, hopefully, on matters that relate to the harbor in this situation. So the work plan doesn't have to be completed today, but you can decide whether you want to discuss it in general, or you want to, later send information to email it to the chair, or and try to finalize it in the next meeting. And at the end, that's a key discussion point. The last item would be, I just wanted to update you on some activities that are going on in parallel with an intern that the town has hired this summer who is working on some issues related to harbor cleanliness in terms of the pollution problem we have with our harbor. There's some activity going on. That person will come to the next harbor committee meeting. I didn't think it was appropriate today because this is too much of a startup and I didn't know where it would go, but she is here. Abby she sits in the front office near Audra. Any of you are welcome to stop by and chat with them. I think Kathy you already have, I believe. Sorry, somebody's at the phone. I'll just give you briefly what she's working on and what we'll be discussing next time. So with that, I don't know how you want to proceed. It's your committee. You can somebody can volunteer, you can choose, select, discuss, but we need to have a chair and a vice chair selected from the members.
I have a procedural question. And
Yes,
that's
sir.
just, how does this work in terms of we're an advisory committee to the select board? How do we deliberate and then present our findings or et cetera to you?
But deliberation is all yours.
Right.
That's all yours. You can come to the select board anytime you want. I would suggest if it's a substantive issue that you want to, you've done your feel you've done your work on, you feel you've done your blah, 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 the liaison's here to help you slide that, get to the select board. Most effective is to come to the select board and discuss it with all five.
At a select board meeting. Yeah, okay.
Yep. Good question.
Yes. I would appreciate a short history of what the committee had been working on,
Sure.
and I guess also how come we have a new committee?
Okay. Okay, well, a good question. We'll get to that when we get to the work plan part, if you don't mind, if it's okay with you. But that's a good, excellent questions. But I'd like to start, we still need to start with, because this, again, this is not our committee, this is your committee. I say that because you're, independent from the select board, but at the same time, advising the select board. So we need to really peg some basics down, the chair, vice chair, and the schedule for your requested, which you collectively believe is the schedule you'd like to have. Is there anybody who would like to be chair or vice chair?
Point of order before that, I have one question.
Of course.
And that is clarification on our roles, Richard and I, in terms of ex officio. And I'm not advocating for either side of this, but my understanding is in most situations, ex officio, while they don't count in whether or not there's a quorum, they do have a vote. And again, one way or the other, I just would like to know at this point whether or not raising my hand is in the future or not.
Yeah, it's a good question, Sandy. And by the way, this all came up from, this is one of the rare circumstances where we actually have an ordinance that dictates the size of a committee. It's the only committee that has that dictated. We have a commission that's dictated by the charter, that's the Conservation Commission. And maybe, well, I'm not talking about boards here. So the commission, this committee is designated to be 5 members and 2 alternates. That's what is required. So for the select board to make a change to that, we have to change the ordinance. It means it has to go to vote. A little bit awkward, in my opinion, a little overreaching. Because at the end of the day, I think the committee should be deciding whether they should have 7 or 9 or 11 or whatever the heck the case might be. It might vary. I've seen them as small as 5, as large as, well, others, I don't want to go there. So that's the way we reached out for the ex officio thing. In my mind, remember, and by the way it's constituted, the 5 members are the voting members of the committee. The 2 alternates will vote or stand instead of the members if a member is not in attendance. And from my perspective, again, the committee can discuss this if they want to, and I would encourage they do so. Ex officios, in my mind, have the same role and responsibility as an alternate. They have the same kind of a position, but I leave this open to the committee to discuss. If the committee, for example, believes this should be a 9-person committee, that's the decision the committee has to discuss. Or it has to be 7 and 2, that's your decision.
But if that's the case, then it has to go before the select board.
We'll go for a change. We'll go for a change. We'll go for a change. And maybe the change is, I mean, I'm just talking out loud, but maybe the change is not specified in the ordinance. Again, it's the only case we've done that. Whenever you put something in an ordinance, it makes it very cumbersome to make changes because you have to go to public vote. So, for example, a lot of times the select board, we prefer on certain matters that don't involve zoning or these other things, not to go to an ordinance, we go to a policy. We have policies in the town the select board can write that says this will be done this way as a policy for the town. They're general in nature. In effect, when we say we have an energy committee, our policy is that it's 7 people. That's just a policy. We can change it tomorrow if we wanted to. So it's open for consideration.
Just to clarify, right now, the way things stand, the committee consists of 5 members,
Correct.
5 voting members.
Correct.
Ex officios
And 2
can
alternates.
participate but not vote.
Alternates, the same thing. You absolutely can participate and not vote unless a member is missing.
So if a member's missing, alternate can vote. If the alternates are missing, can ex officios vote?
I would say yes. I would say yes, but I think this all needs to be clarified by the committee. Remember, we're not a judicial court. We don't need to, nobody's going to sue us, if we, blah, blah, blah. But I think, yeah, I would say yes, especially given these 2, with their experience. Does that answer your question, Sandy?
Yes, thanks for the clarification.
No problem. Sorry, I know it's confusing, but we're handcuffed, and I was a little frustrated by it, to tell you the truth, because when we got to the 30, applications that we received, a tremendous amount of interest. Many of us talked about is, 5 and 2 correct, and you could debate that, and I think you should. I think you should debate it, and I'd throw it in your court. We're happy to make a change to it at some point. We might make changes to harbor ordinance anyway at some point, so it just may be on the list. I don't know. We're looking for your guidance on that area.
Did you say that the Conservation Commission is the only other committee or
I think
commission?
it's the only, I know that's in the charter. The Budget Committee is in the charter.
right.
Yeah, the Budget Committee is 24 people.
21, yeah.
21, 20, something like
The
that.
size of the planning board must be declared somewhere.
Yeah, but I'm excluding boards. I'm excluding boards. Just committees and
okay.
commissions. Boards are are a lot more formal than committees are, and commission is, yeah. That's the only one we're aware of. The energy, historic resources, we could change it tomorrow if we want to. We have openings in CDAC, Economic Development Committee, Energy Committee, and now Conservation Commission, et cetera. But those can be appointed by the select board. We can't do that here. Elliot.
Could you share some thoughts on how rules of order apply to the committee proceedings?
Sure. In general, any committee meeting with the town should be run under Robert's rules, or generally. Are we adamant to that? No. This is a committee. It's a group of people volunteering their valuable time to help us, and we're not going to get rigid on stuff like that. We don't, even on the select board, sometimes we don't. We interpret the rules of Robert's rules, but maintain consistency. It can't float all over the place. It's if that's what your question is, Elliot. Yeah, it should be. We allow. This meeting is for the committee. The committee has to decide how it wants to incorporate the comments from the public, but these are open meetings. They're being videoed and they're open to the public for input. I'll leave that to the chair and vice chair to decide how they organize that and going forward and that kind of thing. But it's all under Robert's rules. Any other questions? Do we have any volunteers for chair or vice chair? Should I start there?
Is it for a one-year term?
I'll make it that way if you want.
Well, no, I'm just curious, because each of us have different terms, so if I've got a three-year term,
Yeah.
I'm not going to sign up for 3 years.
It'd be preferable if the chair were a longer-term member. It would be absolutely preferable, so you're not changing horses, if that could occur, but it would be preferable, yes.
That said, I thought in a select board meeting that it was suggested that the chair position change every year.
I don't recall that, to tell you the truth. I mean, I think that could happen. I mean, the chair does take a little bit extra work, and we're not trying to force something down somebody's throat. So if the committee determines that, let's say, one of the 3-year members assumes the chairmanship and chairpersonship and decides to, in a year, that's just too much. We're not going to force them to continue. We're not going to do that. That's just silly.
So we're doing on the select board. After town meeting every year, we vote on a chair. So last night after town meeting, we voted on a chair and vice chair.
That's right.
Bob kept his job, and we would do the same thing again next year. So
Yeah, we could do that.
I think it makes sense. Like if things are working smoothly, it would make sense that the chair, while you may vote every year, the chair may end up being there for 10 years, and it's a matter of housekeeping. You guys talk about it once a year, but
We have talked about it
Every year.
generally after the appointments are made in July or whenever else.
I don't think there's no written or stated requirement, Kathy, to answer your question.
So if you decided, what would you do? You could take a vote and say, do we want to keep the chair or do we want to change it?
Yeah, you could absolutely do that. Absolutely do that. Usually it's, honestly, it's more, never gets to a vote thing, probably, but yeah, that's actually.
We'd nod our head.
No, you don't have to. I should emphasize, I think Richard and Sandy can speak to this too. And many times on any committee, the discussion is open and it's amongst everybody. There's no gradation of weight of comments. It's not that often when you actually get to a vote thing, for the meeting minutes, if it's obvious that the membership is in favor of something, that's fine. That's not a problem. So it's just, again, we leave this to committee. We don't direct what the committee does, except approve its work plan. So we make sure we're on the same page going forward. Richard, do you have any recommendations to a future chair here as to?
I think I'll pass, you know. I know most of the names and faces, but beyond that,
Who were the 3-year members? I forgot. Kathy, you're one, and Mark, your other. It would seem smart to start off with one of you two as chair, in my opinion, but that's up to you. Doesn't have to be. I'm looking for volunteers.
Yeah, right, that's what I was gonna say.
Okay.
I'd be willing to volunteer.
All right.
I would like maybe some input from Richard. or
Absolutely. I think it's
Other
essential.
members, how to proceed.
It's essential.
Sure.
I mean, yeah, and most of what occurs is really the chair is just, setting up the meetings, and Liz does all the hard work with the meeting minutes and all that kind of thing. So you're kind of lucky to have, most committees don't have that. They do their own meeting minutes and have to get them submitted, so that helps a lot. Coordinating meetings, coordinating the meeting is the most important thing as we do with the select board meeting, just making sure we hear all voices and without, going onto extreme lengthy debates about anything in a particular area. Keep the progress of the accomplishments of the community moving forward. As Richard, and yeah, talk to Richard. He can give you some good feedback, or Sandy even, about some of the good and the bad and the ugly of being chair and having to get into. There will be controversial issues. There will be. That's part of the nature of the beast, and how to effectively keep those going forward without belaboring something. But that's good. Vice Chair,
Wouldn't mind,
Elliot?
whichever.
Yeah, I would
All
be
right.
willing to take on that responsibility.
You got it. So, the record that Mark will be chair for at least a year, and Elliot Thompson will be vice chair for.
Do we have to have a vote on that? Should, as a
I
point
would,
of
just for
order?
courtesy, I would make a motion to accept those two. Somebody.
Yeah, I'll make that motion, that we accept Mark Siegenthaler as the chair and Elliot as the vice chair.
Somebody seconded? All those in favor? 5-0. Cool. You've got that now to your question earlier about, I've forgotten everything, it was about why and the wherefores of the committee change, really difficult. That was a decision that was bred out of, well, a couple of things. In the backdrop, there's been a pent-up interest of people in the town of being on this committee. I've heard that from some of the people who've been in the town office a long time. That was a backdrop of it. They were asking, where's the list of getting on the committee? And seriously, it was. There was one person.
Papyrus.
There was one person, I forget who this person was, not here, by the way, but had submitted an application some years ago, and it got lost in the woodwork. And, that was a backdrop of it. But then on the top of it, during some of the deliberations of the committee in the past, it felt like a reconstitution of it to be more reflective of the town and what goes on in the harbor, which is in the ordinance, by the way, and a little less, try to minimize to the extent possible the conflicts of interest. We had a number of very, very good, excellent people who are actually business owners. That would have been absolutely perfect if we had a situation where they represented their cadre of people where it may have been, but they don't. They don't have that. That's not the way we're set up. We have a vibrant harbor, and Steve can speak to this more than anybody, with many businesses operating out of it. So to be fair in representing all of them, I thought the best way to do it would be to, and then, by the way, you can't just say, well, this person has too much of a conflict of interest, so we're going to plug and play. We couldn't do that. That's not fair. So you either do it all or you don't do it. That was it. That was simple as that. Did we throw out some of the babies with the bathwater? Absolutely. Absolutely did. That entire committee was a group of very dedicated, hardworking people, two of which are here, but they're not the only ones. It was really, really difficult decision. We couldn't plug and play, so we said we have to do the whole thing. That was recommended, and that's what was approved. did they do anything wrong or better or worse? No, every committee's going to have its pluses and minuses. I mean, I go to numerous committee meetings and just sit and listen more than anything and like to see things a little bit different, but that's not our role. That's not what we do. You can discuss anything you want here. You can discuss or make recommendations on anything you want. We're not directing. We don't want to. But we certainly would like to know what is being worked on, because we don't want you. One of the things that happens with committees across the board is they come to me or Taylor and say, you know, we worked really hard on this, and they came to the select board and they said no. You know, well, a couple of those cases, many of those cases happened because we didn't really know that they were working on that area. We didn't really request it. We have many priorities on our list as select board that we have to pay attention to, especially on a bi-weekly basis, twice a month. Stuff coming in from left field, not that it wasn't valuable, not that it wasn't needed to be discussed, but it's a question of when and how we discuss things. It's a timing thing. So that's why we really reinforced for the last year or so this work plan idea of the committees to have a general work plan. We're working on establishing the next year's rates for the voters in the harbor for recommendation to the select board. That's a work plan item. It's things like that. They had been working on continuing, one of the continuing work areas was the harbor ordinance. I think it always needs, as times change, constant evaluation of whether it's thanks a lot.
Thank you. Sorry I have to leave
No, it's
early,
no
but
problem. That's
good
no
to meet you
problem.
all.
Thanks, Ernie.
Yeah.
Ryan, see you.
Whether or not it needs to be revisited, because it has to go through vote. And I mentioned one earlier, just a little silly thing about the committee membership. If you want to consider, that's up to you all. I think it's easier. Overregulation is a real problem for a town. When you get things into the ordinance format, it better be really important to have it there, because to change it for any reason takes a lot of time, So the harbor ordinance thing was constant, right, Richard? We were always looking at that for, do we need to make any changes to it? Is it under-regulated? Is it over-regulated? It could be either way. That's a core thing for the harbor committee, I think. How do we sustain and enhance the businesses that are our harbor, and you know, are we doing anything to over-regulate or under-regulate there? Thirdly, and many of you mentioned in your applications, is how do we make sure this harbor is usable to the residents of Camden? This is an asset in the town. I can't tell you how many people I know that don't know about how to get to Curtis Island. You know, and we're not opening up for 300 people a day. I'm not suggesting that, but it seems to me that there's got to be something we can do to make it more of an asset for the residents of Camden. That is of interest, I think, to the town, select board, and everybody, and it should be, in my opinion, of interest to you all. Is there an answer? I don't know. We're asking. Those are some of the bigger areas that came up. Now, as always, the harbor committee is, and by ordinance, a mechanism for appeal for the town. If there's somebody that has a problem with a mooring situation by a regulation in the harbor, and they can, rather than appeal it directly to they would start with Steve typically, of course, because he can.
Yeah, they come to my office and go, blah, 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 blah.
And he usually adjudicates almost all of it.
Starts.
But once in a while, the regulations we have on moorings or floats, it's not black and white. It can be interpretive, so that somebody could come here and appeal to this board, to this committee for information input, in which case they could talk about it and recommend to Steve or the select board what they might adjudicate on that issue. It's not common.
Yeah, in the 19 years I've been harbor master, we had that done twice. The harbor committee became formally the appellant board, and there was a case heard. Once had to do with inner harbor float size. In 2002, when we were redesigning the inner harbor, just after the federal dredge, 2 floats were too big, and we wanted them to come into conformance, and they didn't want to. And the other one was a late payment of a 40-foot boat that they forgot to pay. They lost their mooring, and it was a really good spot, and they wanted to appeal the decision that the town
took away their spot. That was harder because it was black and white. It said black and white. If you don't pay by this date, you lose your mooring. What Bob's saying is that there is a lot of gray in this, which gives us a little flexibility to, massage things and to maximize the use of the harbor. But then it does come down to my shoulders a lot.
So how did that mooring situation turn out?
I believe that was not given.
Right, we did not.
Just quickly on the, touching on the work plan, I think it's something we've been emphasizing from the select board, probably over the last half year especially, in making sure that, that the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. I think we found that communication in town government is probably the most important and also the most challenging thing to stay on top of. We have a relatively new select board. And I think we found in the last year, there were some committees that would come to us with stuff that they've spent a great deal of time working on. And the first time we heard something about it at the select board level was after hundreds or however many hours have been put into it. And it was something that perhaps none of the board members were even interested in seeing and putting forward. So I think outside of day-to-day harbor business that may come across this committee once a month or however often you meet, I think long-term things and major changes, I think that's where the work plan can be really helpful for prioritizing what are the most important things and what should we be spending most of our time on to make your time as valuable as it can be and efficient. And I think we found the Energy Committee is a great example. They've recently really hammered down their work plan that we worked with them on, so we know what they're working on, and they come to us and get periodic updates, and it's become really efficient. So I think that's the goal for the work plan, is really efficiency and not wasting your all's time. Yeah.
I think there was maybe it's a fallacy of or understanding, at least lack of understanding, that because I'm sitting here or Taylor's sitting here, that it gets back to the select board. It doesn't. The reason is because we do have select board reports during our Tuesday meetings. We have a long agenda. For me, as an individual, to try to detail everything that was discussed of substance in this meeting and meetings going forward, plus the other, there's 22 committees in this town, and it's not small. So to get an effective feedback to the select board, it still is not working effectively. The video thing is helping, by the way, because I can go and see the last Energy Committee meeting before they come next Tuesday and just scan through it video-wise and check it out. It helps a lot. But it just wasn't getting translated. And I think some committees were thinking, because there was a liaison from the select board there, that the select board was being informed of everything that was going on. No, didn't work that way.
So can we back up a minute here, and do we have a secretary?
Liz is our
Liz is the secretary.
Yes.
Historically, we have appointed a secretary, though I'm not at all sure that it's a position that needs to
You're
exist.
supposed to do that, but if you don't, I'm not going to worry about it. Only because we've got a special situation here, having a harbor clerk. No other committee has, to my knowledge, a clerk.
Right.
Yeah, that's the only one that does is harbor. So you're kind of lucky in that regard.
Well, the harbor is different in that
It's very
needs
different.
to be a person in the town office who deals with harbor masters.
Correct.
Harbor matters,
Correct.
so.
Yep, taking in fees.
And harbor master.
Yeah, and the harbor master, yeah. That may have been a slip of the tongue, but maybe it wasn't.
And by the way, the source of work plan items is a good point. Steve is a great source of work plan input, because, he's in the harbor every day, not in it literally, but close. Sometimes in it. But I think that's an asset you have that's really important also, beyond the generic stuff I talked about use of the harbor, more generic discussions that there's no specific answer for.
So far, we have 2 items on the work plan. One is the cleanliness of the harbor, which would be referred to overboard discharge.
That's part of it. It's only part of it. It's only part of it. You'll see more of that, but overboard discharge is definitely the first step.
I have some ideas on that.
Good, great.
And improving residential use or promoting residential use.
Public use.
Public use.
Yeah, I just use that term, because
Yep.
honestly, it doesn't have to be a resident, it can be anybody, but I think that's essential. We're trying to do the same thing with the snowball. this year, we instituted, for the first time, as a trial, free Wednesdays for residents at the snowball skier. Trying to get people to be able, it can be an expensive sport for some young families, so give them a chance to try and kick the tires on it and not have to pay the lift ticket part, at least. It worked out.
I think that was a great idea, but it rained every Friday, except one, or Wednesday, I mean.
It did. But that's the kind of thinking we're talking about, what can we do that can enhance people's utilize these things for which they're paying some taxes for in the case of the snowball. But yes, those are a couple. But that's a very generic, but that you'll put flesh on the bone of how that may go forward. There's always one, just in general, and I think it needs to be always covered, and that's the harbor ordinance, how complete or incomplete it is. It's a very substantive document. It's one of our longer ones. It covers everything from new berths and piers to all kinds of things in it.
I'd just like to say, I mean, I have read through the ordinance, and I was impressed with how well it's put together and how clear and concise everything is.
If you get closer to it, like I said, again, I'm preaching on this little tiny thing, and it's your decision about the membership. That's an area where, is it overreaching or not? I don't know. That's why we'll listen to y'all's recommendation there. Leave it alone, change it, whatever. Now, especially with the ex officio thing, it's something you guys can discuss, as part of your committee responsibility. But pour through it with a fine tooth comb. Go through it, see if there's anything missing or not. And as we go through the process, you'll get a better feel for that. I think it's not going to happen overnight, just reading it. But yeah.
Before Jeff Nims left as code enforcement officer, we at his direction, spent a lot of time reviewing the whole ordinance. And in some respects, I'm sort of hoping it might get a little slimmer, but it didn't. That may be the nature of the beast.
It may be.
Show me an ordinance that's ever gotten slimmer.
Thank you. They always get fatter.
It might be a goal rather than something you're going to get to.
Well, it was in 02 or 03, we had, right here, we had at least 15 people, a lot of volunteers that were tangential to the Harbor Committee came and were helping, and it must have been about a 3 to 4 month process.
I think it might have been closer to 6 months.
It was-
and they were weekly meetings with
weekly
probably
meetings.
some exceptions.
We really hammered that out. We took this and we separated it and said, okay, these 3 people are going to be in charge of this, and we came back and just kept talking and kept redoing it, and we really did a good job on shaping it up and changing it to it. Since then, we've only done a couple small ones. But Sandy, you were an integral part in doing that last one. So yeah, it still needs work, but it is a good piece of literature.
In addition to sort of reviewing the harbor ordinance and I guess the rate structure for the various uses, is there anything else that the committee reviews on an annual basis? Just sort of almost housekeeping kind of thing?
The fall is the rate structure for the fall, next year.
Right.
Which is moorings and blah, blah, blah. That's typically been reviewed by the committee and, recommendations to the select board. We tried to do, I forget the exact date, when we do all the rates, snowball rates, and we try to do it all in the same select board meeting. We haven't been successful at that.
Around April.
I was going to say, maybe, it's earlier than that. When do we send out the bills for mooring stuff, in April?
Earlier.
February. I think it's,
The fees get done,
fall.
you bring it to us in October, maybe,
gonna say the fall.
ideally.
It's the
But
fall.
it is the fall. that it-
Trying to get it before the
And
second week of November, yeah.
there are things relative to day sailor permits that happen on an annual basis. They go to get approved by the select board.
Fisherman
and there are
applications, yeah.
And fishermen, and there may be some others.
Yeah,
The
that's,
ordinance includes some dates, which Liz does a remarkably good job of keeping us on our toes of when we have to deal with them.
yeah, there's the annual day sailor agreements that are done every year, and
Windjammers
the
are
winter is
3
every
years.
3 years, which will come up next year. windjammers will, 3-year will expire next April, I think. I'm not positive. I'm 90% sure next April would be the windjammer agreements for the 6 windjammers in the harbor, currently in the harbor. I don't remember anything
I
else.
don't think there's any other, then it seems like there may be something else
Something always
lurking.
pops up, but those are the biggies. Those are the biggies. And then there's always like the burning issues that we've already mentioned a few. We've been, in my opinion, we've been tremendously remiss as a town in following through on some reports that were done in 2004 and 2012 on the harbor in terms of its water quality. It's one of our, the 3rd most polluted harbor in the state or something like that.
Really?
Those are dirty.
Well, it's a long story, but those reports are available. We can certainly make them available to you guys. And
What were the dates on those?
I think it's 04 and 012, I think. No, one's 12. One was done by DEP, and I forget who the other one was done by. Steve, do you remember? We can get those to you.
We've got lots of information from the last time we got a grant, an
Yeah.
$8,000 grant, and we did extensive studying
Yep.
for one whole year,
Yep.
trying to find the smoking gun. We never did.
Yeah, we
But it
still
brought
have.
us closer.
Yeah, we did, and some things have been done with wastewater treatment situations where we have pumping station on C Street, which I still think is an issue, by the way, but that's my engineering opinion.
It's better than when I grew up and low tide was toilet paper on the beach. Discharge pipe, I used to throw rocks in.
Hopefully, we've evolved.
I think we have, but we had some situations, well, remember, the town has been actively involved with the Conservation Commission and others on what we refer to as an I&I study, infusion and on, but what we found, we were looking at every home connected to the sewer system to see if there were misconnections, and we found some. Inadvertent, absolutely inadvertent. Somebody just plugged in a thing and put it in the drain pipe, it goes to the harbor, right? And we're 80% complete with that. We do have 20% or so, which we need to act upon. Some who haven't responded as quickly as we'd like about doing inspection, that kind of thing. Which, my point is, we're trying to go through the list of things that we need to do to see, we really don't understand exactly what percentage, we may never, by the way, is coming from where. The measurements are it's basically animal and human waste, both. That's a combined test. It's different than coliform, which is human only. And it can be at times quite high. But the only current measurement we do, to I'm aware of, Steve, is Lake Beach by Maine Healthy Beaches on a weekly basis during the summer. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think there's one more spot.
Is there one more spot?
Yeah.
My point is, we're looking at, is that adequate? Is it adequate to understand what may be, and by the way, is it also being done at a time when a rainstorm occurs? Because runoff can be causing some.
So is the sense that most of it is coming from some land-based source versus boats?
That's what we got. When it rains hard, we get a spike, so we're using that information to say it is land-based.
If you get a spike in February, you can be pretty certain it's not a boat.
Yeah, and of course, looking at boat waste too, just to be careful, of course, make sure we have people aware of boat waste being the issue. For example, a lot of people I know are not fully aware that Camden provides a free pump-out service, as does Lemon Morse, I believe, Josh. Great, people need to advertise that more. We need to keep monitoring how much pump-out we do, and we can do that, just as a matter of course. But anyhow, the whole issue with the harbor thing is, to me, it's big. Because when you don't know something, you want to at least try to put your arms around it and think that maybe most of it's coming from here. We'll never know exactly how much or what. The sewer system is, in areas, a bit antiquated. And, when we have on the radar to, with the wastewater treatment plant upgrade to redo Bayview Street, there's one other, I forget which one it is, to get it up to a better situation. Could there be? Maybe it's Maguntacook River it's contributing here. I mean, we have a huge waterfall in our town, beautiful waterfall, and lots of water coming from the river. We know it's not coming from the wastewater treatment plant because that is monitored by our wastewater treatment gang. And so we know that's not a source of the enterococci. But this is an open issue. We just can't let it lay on the table dormant. That's my point. We've got to at least talk about it, pay attention to it. And that's what Abby is doing here now as an intern, trying to help us to resurrect those reports, see what was recommended to be done, and maybe come up with some recommendations on boat waste, and maybe come up with recommendations on monitoring. It's not going to happen overnight. It'll take us 5 years to determine really what's going on. But it is polluted, it has issues, and we can't ignore it.
Can I ask what's the, sounds like a stupid question, but what's the downside? You know, what uses or stuff is it affecting in the harbor?
Swimming. And then you get to above a certain level, where you get to that point where you wonder whether we should be putting up signs in Lake Beach saying, measurements say, this is a high level. That's the issue, from a personal perspective, I think, more than anything. I mean, the harbor is not used except at Lake Beach but we know there are a lot of people who go in the water, voluntarily and not, and we just, that's the sensitivity to it. You've seen signs around the harbor that says, don't feed the animals, don't feed the ducks, don't feed the geese. That's all part of that. That's all part of that whole issue.
Are there any studies in Sherman's Cove?
Of what?
Sherman's Cove?
Yeah, water quality?
That's my problem, no. I haven't seen any. I honestly, we're talking out loud here, but I wonder if some of this stuff is coming from the West Penobscot Bay. We don't know. We have a harbor that's kind of dead-ended. It doesn't wash itself out, unfortunately. Is it all coming from Camden sources? I don't know. I just don't know. I think we are talking about setting up a more substantive measurement process, which would include Sherman's Cove, entrances to the harbor's at the head of the harbor, up where the waterfalls are, and et cetera, et cetera.
You said that we're going to we'll meet Abby at the next meeting, perhaps.
Yes. And feel free to talk with her beforehand, if you'd like.
But is, from the select board's purview, is her research going to cover more than just boat influences? Okay, because you mentioned boat repair.
Well, good question, because when Conservation Commissioner Roger Rittmaster came to us, the select board, and he listed boat waste as a top priority. Well, that's nice, but we don't know, honestly, what the exact if and how much the boat waste contributes to this. We don't know.
Right.
In fact, from my gut feeling is it ain't a hell of a lot.
Camden's a zero discharge.
That is correct.
Yeah.
That is correct. Can it inadvertently happen? Of course it can. If I hit the switch in my boat and it says macerator instead of freshwater pump, it could happen, of course. Do we have, I would be very surprised to think there's blatant discharge in the harbor. Is there discharge in West Penobscot Bay? Probably. Do people understand or remember the regulation that says X miles out? Probably not. And do they actually do it? Probably not. On the other hand, I also think boat use is not increasing, it's kind of levelized. And some, are people actually using their boats enough to pump them out more than once a year? I don't know. I don't know. But we can do some things that I think in public awareness in that area. But no, it should not be the only. We had a meeting on this here yesterday, and I think there's some things we'll try to institute for boat waste, but I don't want her 10 weeks to be spent on just the boat waste issue.
So my thought process on that is, on the annual mooring applications, there'd be a questionnaire. First of all, do you use the free pump-out service in the harbor? Yes or no? And then the other would be, do you have overboard discharge? Does your boat meet the Coast Guard CFR regulations for overboard discharge?
You're absolutely right.
Answer those questions and
Abby has that on our list, which basically a flyer that would go in our applications that we send out every year. That's those questions and more, because when it's informational, because there's many different kinds of boat waste systems. There's some that don't even have a discharge. You have to pump them out. There are some that have just a Y valve that drains, how do they, so we want that information, and we also want it signed by the boat owner.
Exactly.
And so, you hit it right in the head, Mark. That's the number one recommendation. It's easy to do. And we'll get information from it too. They tried a survey once before voluntarily. They got like 13% response because, people are busy, honestly.
Yeah, but, so
No,
you're,
that's-
so your recommendation is it's part of the application, they don't get approved unless they've
Tied
answered
right
those
to your
questions.
mooring.
That's correct.
You
That's correct.
Yeah,
we-
answer
we-
it, sign
We
it.
want that tightrope between being overly regulated, we don't want to be the one harbor in the United States that requires you to have a special sticker on your boat that says you were inspected every 5 minutes. We don't want to go that extreme. On the other hand, we have to pay attention to it. And we have commercial operations too, there in the harbor. It's not just private boat owners that we have to be conscious of and be careful of. And we only have really three, to my knowledge, entities in the harbor that deal with boats coming in and out. It's the Yacht Club, Lyman Morse, and Town of Camden. Is that right, Steve?
Yeah.
Pretty much? I think those are the ones where we have a lot of transient traffic too. We have a lot of traffic coming from other places. Great, we want to encourage that. But we also want them to be knowledgeable that we're a clean harbor, and if you got somebody, we're here to do it for you for free. We're more than happy to do it. Lyman Morse can do it. Steve and company can do it. It's available, but a lot of people don't know it's available. It's hard to get information out sometimes. But that's big. To me, and from my perspective, that's big, the harbor, and at least understanding why it's a problem. Or we think this is a principal contributor or not. And we really don't have that. And Dave Bolstrich, wastewater director, is very proactive here and a great help. He's working on this also with us and helping to identify, because they can do testing too. We have a lab at the wastewater treatment plant. They can actually do the testing right here. So it doesn't cost us thousands and thousands of dollars to do testing.
I'm curious, what are the two more polluted harbors?
I don't know. I don't know where they are.
Rockport.
Is it Rockport?
Yeah.
Really?
Rockport is another one.
If you ask the tourists, Camden and Rockport must be the cleanest harbor.
Yeah, I know.
Right in the Northeast.
Yeah, they look it, don't they? They
No, I
do
think
look
it shows that it's land-based.
In Rockport.
I think it is. I really believe it is. I believe the runoff, I don't think our stormwater system is capable of handling big storms. We know that. So it's an infrastructure thing. We also have lots of impermeable surfaces, roads, sidewalks, buildings, and this stuff washes just right into the harbor in heavy rainstorm. So if we continue to see the spikes during rain events, we'll know that probably the principal contributor is probably land-based.
I'd like to go, when we're making our work plan, I'd also like to talk about the waiting list, how it's managed, how it's processed in relation
Are you
to the
talking
rate
about
structure.
moorings?
The wait, yep.
Moorings and floats?
Floats,
Okay.
I think
Okay.
that's critical.
Yeah, the wait list's a little longer on the slips, I'm sure, but it's not as long on the moorings.
Since I've started, the Outer Harbor wait list has really been reduced. I think that's because of more moorings that I've put in with the 5 approved inspectors, and the fact that we now have 4 barges. So we're more likely in the spring to, maneuver, 30-footers around to then create a new 26-footer. Obviously, I can't put in any more inner harbor floats. We actually did one since '02, since the rebuild. But it's, it's,
That's why I want to talk about the process of the waiting
That's
list,
a
not
good idea.
necessarily the expansion.
yeah.
Got it.
So for the finger floats and the inner harbor floats, yeah, that's still a 9-year wait list, approximately.
9. That's actually short. I'm surprised that's short.
Moorings are a couple of years at this point.
Depending on what size boat, but yeah, anywhere between 2 and 5 years.
Yeah, it's not that long. There is one other thing that was discussed last year, and I'll bring it up just to put on your list. It relates to the harbor ordinance. We as a town cannot control or stop anybody from doing a fireworks display because they get the permit from the state fire marshal. When they have that permit, correct me if I'm wrong here, Steve, they get that permit, we can't refuse, blah, blah, blah. So we investigated with our town attorney some options of making, the reason why we care is because of potential fire. The fire department should be notified that there is going to be a display, and they're great, we're not trying to stop them. But what we were contemplating, and we haven't done it yet, was revising the ordinance to allow the town to permit any barge of any size coming into the harbor for any reason. That could be for construction, it could be for a fireworks display. So it's an indirect way of getting us knowledgeable on events that may occur in the harbor. I'm not suggesting that this occurs on a frequent basis. It does not. We're generally knowledgeable of when fireworks displays are occurring in the harbor. But that was a contemplation, and we'd appreciate the input of the committee if they have any opinion in that regard of controlling barges coming into the harbor. The other thing that happens too is, I know Steve gets this, we've had construction going on in the harbor, and you control very well the barges when they need to be out, so we can get floats in the spring and that kind of thing. That's working, seems to be working pretty well. But there will be construction going on. We should be knowledgeable of when stuff is coming in the harbor.
State has a lot to say about that,
It
too.
absolutely does. It absolutely does. And, but we want to be cognizant of it too. So it's just something to contemplate. Is it a barn burner? No. It's not.
So to back up, when we were talking about the wait list, there's something that's kind of been nagging me here is, on the wait list, it's a $25 fee. If you're a day late, it's a $50 late fee.
Oh.
And I question the legality of that.
Good question. Good
Well,
question.
Yeah, as far as the legality, it's the township that makes that ruling.
Right.
Part of the rate structure.
But I'm,
So you're saying, I mean, it's legal, but you might want to say the fairness, is the word you wanted to use.
yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it is fair because of the small amount.
I agree, it is
Or
legal, it is
I'm-
legal, but it might not be fair. We have the legality to
I
make
suspect
that
you do have the
number.
right to do it. The question of whether is it fair to do it or not is a good question.
Well,
We're not trying to be
I
punitive.
guess where I'm going here is like Fair Trade Commission. I
Oh,
mean,
I don't know.
you know, with credit cards, you know, there's a cap on fees that you can actually charge. And I just wonder if the town falls under that.
We've talked about doing a different type of late fee, where, like you're saying, it was for the first 2 weeks or a month, it's only this much. And then after that, it says, if you haven't paid by this date, you lose your mooring. So, or you get pushed off the waiting list. Now, if someone who's obviously just talking to a gentleman yesterday in my office, he got on the waiting list for a finger float last year. He got pushed off because it seemed like he was honest. I didn't receive anything, I didn't get anything, and so now I've got to pay my $25 and I'm back on the bottom, which isn't a big deal, it's only a year. But if you've been there for 8 years and you get pushed off, that's a big deal. So they're like, I'll pay anything, I want to go back to where I was. You know, talk about being fair. You could charge what you wanted. Okay, it's $1,000 to get back to where you were, and they'd pay it. So we'd have.
That's not fair.
Well, I don't know.
It's not a fair
But the fact is,
process.
it might not be fair, but they'd like it if you gave them that option.
Yep.
We don't have that option right now. So,
Well, that's,
You got plenty of warning.
yeah, so I guess what I'm saying is that there's a point where, as an administration, you've got to say, okay, well, if you don't pay, how are you going to be culpable of that?
It's a penalty.
that late fee notification is done by certified mail, right?
Yep.
Um,
And I keep everything, he signed his certified letter.
So he, I didn't receive it, doesn't go very far.
Yeah,
Yeah, his cat can't sign for him.
that stuff happens. Certainly
But
can
that's something to
discuss,
talk about,
certainly
yeah.
discuss it. Yeah, that's not a problem. If you find out there's something in the woodpile that you think is not fair, not great, bring it up. You know, this stuff can be packaged and brought to the select board in a package, doesn't have to be done individually, so you don't have to worry about that. But that's the kind of questions you need to ask about the town.
Does the toilet down on the waterfront fall under our remit?
No, that is Parks and Rec.
In terms of his hours, Parks and
The
Recreation.
what, you mean the actual
Well, it's just,
restrooms?
interestingly, I've heard a lot of complaints about
It doesn't get open in time.
or it's not clean, or not. I did a little survey of one and thought, geez, this is one of the, for what it is, it's perfectly adequate. But I was just wondering if it's anything we need to review in terms of making it more accessible to the public. I mean, I often think communities need to advertise that they have public
Yes,
utilities.
yes.
I don't think we do a good enough job of that, because not enough people actually
Ever
go
since
down
I've
there.
gotten here, we've talked about showers
Yeah, we
for the
have.
boats. It's never actually culminated.
No.
Try to get showers for
It's
boaters.
Showers, laundry services as a harbor, we don't have that. There has been discussion, and it does connect to the harbor, and that is boaters using the facility versus using their holding tanks. But it closes at 7 o'clock at night. Do we want to go as far as putting a key code lock on the door for Steve's regulation to give that code to boaters if they want to use it at night? Those could certainly be
That's not,
discussed.
that's
That
not
relate- that
supporting the
relate- that relate-
community and the public, it's
That-
just supporting a limited audience. So
That's
I think
very, very true. That's very, very
if we
true.
want to be available and the lights are on
Yep.
naturally till 9, then, anyway, it's another topic.
But
but-
that's the only way it relates to the harbor. It is Parks and Rec. And there has been discussion about, question about hours of operation. I know that for a fact.
But related to that, the redevelopment of the waterfront there at the public landing, that's a project that's sort of very much in play right now, I understand. Is that part of our purview or no?
Well, certainly input, absolutely. It's, we've gotten involved in, I forget the group that's, not us, not the town, but a state group that's looking at various harbors, and we're one of them that they're looking at everything from what can be done, what should be done, with regard to the ocean rising and all these other things. It's very complicated for us because, as you know, our waterfront is not all publicly owned. Part of it's privately owned. So that's one. And two, its topography is a problem. If the ocean rises enough, we have certain restaurants and places are underwater in downtown Camden.
That's a group that Jeremy Martin just
Yes.
did a great job. They were not going to include Camden's water. I believe the idea, the long-term idea is that they're going to review places in West Penobscot Bay that would make sense to, is going to see sea level rise, and if we're going to redevelop it under this purview and potentially having grants available in the future. And Jeremy did a good job of advocating to get us, so we're now part of that. And this is within the last month or so it's pretty new, but I'm sure there'll be more coming up on that.
Yeah, we're probably in the infant stages of that, honestly.
Because
I'm sorry, it'd just be nice, to figure that out, because every spring I get the highway and we piecemeal work back together after winter. And it's just getting older, it's 30 years old, so it's very simply built. It's just 2x10s resting on crushed rock, but, it's starting to look a little weird because it's just so, I mean, instead of once a year having it underwater, it's 4 times a year underwater. And then if there's waves, you can see that it's moving stuff around under there, and it's,
It's sinking. It's sinking.
yeah. So, like I said to Audra, it'd be nice if we could have a plan set forth and not wait the 5 years for someone to say, they're saying this through a straw, the ocean is rising, and we should do something, we should figure what do we want to do in the next 2 years and do it. If possible, we should have a 2-year goal to rebuild at least anything anything south of the harbor master's office, between the harbor master office and
Waterfall.
the ice cream.
Oh, the ice cream stand.
The ice cream stand.
Okay.
So everything's south, because that's, to me, that's the most affected and the worst as far as being squirrely
It
looking,
is. It is. It is. It is. Steve, is there anything from your perspective that you want to recommend or make the committee knowledgeable on in terms of harbor reconfigurations, landing reconfigurations, or anything beyond what you just mentioned?
I just think it'd be interesting if we could get, maybe next harbor community, we could get the diagrams that T.Y. Lin did. We spent hours and hours of community meetings and talking about what would be best for the harbor, and it'd be interesting to take a look at that, because it's been 6-7 years now.
More than that.
Is it? Has it? Well,
Those about,
T.Y. Lin, we had a $200,000 grant or something like that, and engineers came in and said, here's what you want to do, and we had huge meetings of people saying, well, here's one, you only lose 3 parking spots here, or you could have a big forest instead of a parking lot where you lose all your parking. And they gave all these different ideas of
Various
options of what you want to do with your harbor front, and we kind of voted like, okay, we think this is a good thing right here. Let's do this one. And it's all designed, it's there, and I think we should look at it now and say, do we want to keep anything from this? Do we want to throw it all away? But I think it merits us looking at it, bringing it back up, and then figuring out where do we want to go. We are going to rebuild the waterfront in the next 5-6 years, so the wharf, the harbor master's office. So what do we want to do? Where do we want to move this to, you know?
So if something was approved, why wasn't it actioned? You said you selected one.
Well, the TY Lynn report was a very, very good report, and it had probably at least 3 that I call principal options of
Yeah.
what you could do with your land. Remember, the entire world today is reinvigorating waterfront property. And so it's more, Baltimore is a great example of it. I think there are many others in the world, in Europe, that have reinvigorated their harbors, been making it more of a go-to place. That's what they were trying to do. For example, the one he mentioned, where there was no parking lot. It was a beautiful landscaped area by the waterfront for the public, but all the parking places were gone, which is an issue with Camden, of course. But, yeah, I would revisit that and take a look at it again.
But why wasn't anything actioned?
Oh,
You said one was selected.
It was selected, but then we had no money to actually do it, the plan,
Why did you accept a $200,000 grant to review options?
because it was free money.
Yeah,
We took the money, we paid the engineers, because the money was for engineering and design. So we were like, okay, well, yeah, we'll take a look at what our options are. We know some good, cool ideas. I thought some of it was ridiculous myself,
Well, whatever.
personally, but there was also some good points they brought up that I was like, oh, that's,
So where is this report?
I do not know.
Oh, it's on the website.
Yeah, it'd be nice if we could look at them and
We
say,
can pull it.
pick
We can
some
pull
cool
it.
things out, and then say, what
I
do we
see
want to
that.
do? I mean, I've got some great ideas for the area where the falls are, and, I mean, as a community, as, like Bob was saying, I mean, it's such a beautiful harbor.
It is.
And I just think there's some untapped things we could do. We could maximize the use of that if we think about it and start talking, so the next 5-6 years. we can implement.
One of the things that happens, Kathy, is, and I've seen this across the board, I've been on the select board for just 2 years, full-time now. And one of the things I have seen is spending time to go back and look at things. There were a number, not the least of which was the harbor reports about pollution. One of them is 7 years old. I'm not saying we sat on our laurels that whole 7 years, but sometimes what actually occurs is things get done for good reason, and then things change. We change administration in the town, we change select boards. This stuff is a natural, we change committees. People come off and come on. They get lost in the woodwork of day to day, and it's very common, but you can't let that happen. You just can't let that happen. So that's why we're bringing these things up to you all, so you can spend some time taking a look at them and glancing through them and deciding whether or not you have some recommendations or, whatever you want to play with.
I want to make sure I understood what you were talking about. The wooden superstructure that's basically right in front of your office.
The
That is a
boardwalk.
given, needs to be redone.
That's a wharf, it's over 30 years old. It was built by a local, the highway guys who built it. Yeah, it's, I would love to keep that exact design. I mean, this is personally me. I would hate to bring in an engineer company and say, oh, you should build your wharf like this. It's already been designed and it's lasted 30 years. It's well designed, it's simple. I think we should look at that and say, we just want you to rebuild this, raise it up a foot or whatever they tell us that we should do, because the ocean's rising. And we're gonna have to regrade some of that parking lot because it's just too low and it's underwater 2 times a year. And then just build it the same way. It's gonna last us another 30 years, 35 years, and in the 35 years, another group will be saying, what should we do now?
Exactly.
30 years sounds like the new pier to me.
Thank you. There's 2 places in the harbor at least where there's issues with the harbor, with the ocean reclaiming the land, and one of them is the landing, and the other one's the yacht club. They're seeing some of the same things. Not only is the ocean probably changing to some degree, the land is sinking because the ocean's coming in, taking dirt out with it at every tide. And that area, I bet if we dug up underneath the landing, we'd find all kinds of fun stuff buried underneath there, from cars to boats to whatever the heck. It's not stable land. So the landing parking lot I can guarantee you, has gone down in elevation. And with it, the landing itself. It has to have, I don't know how much, I have no idea, it's inches, whatever.
Do we need to leave it 8:45?
There's another meeting coming in.
Yeah, so we need to set our next
We have to
meeting.
set our meeting schedule.
Yes, we have to set a meeting schedule and a date and time that you'd like to, and any actions you'd like the committee to take a look at going forward before the next meeting. It's your call when you want to have meetings, it's going to be here. What day, what time, it's your call.
Any suggestions?
What was Ronnie's departure, is that a scheduled thing, or is
Oh, I
that
don't think
just?
so.
That certainly is not something that he knows about a month from now.
Yeah, for sure.
It's up to you, all you, and I wouldn't think he has got a schedule problem.
7:30s are great.
Yeah, this time works great for me.
Yeah, 7:30 is a good time for me. Thursday's not, but I'm in the West Bay Rotary, so if
Oh.
we want to move it a day.
Sure.
And that's our Rotary meeting. On the other hand, I can miss one Rotary a month if we do a monthly meeting, but I
That's your
prefer
call.
not to.
That's your call. I don't know there's anything religious about Thursdays. I think it was just, we settled in on it.
Right, Thursdays has been, for many years, we have changed to Monday during the summer because of.
Right.
Because of the fact that has often been a Windjammer owner
Yep,
on the committee.
Yep.
And that's the only day of the week that they're
Make it.
guaranteed
Yeah.
or highly likely to be in town.
you've got a choice of Monday through Friday.
I don't want to do it Monday.
Yeah, I don't want to do
I
it
think
Monday.
Tuesday or Wednesday.
Monday, there are
Tuesday or
lots of
Wednesday.
people that didn't like
Yeah.
Monday.
Tuesday or Wednesday.
All right,
Tuesday or Wednesday?
I'd rather have Wednesday.
Wednesday?
Wednesday.
Wednesday, 7:30?
Okay, what, do you want to do the first
Does
Wednesday of the
8
month?
o'clock work any better?
How long the meeting's gonna go? Usually 2 hours?
No, they're usually about an hour.
The meeting, your meeting should be an hour.
Yeah, we rarely get out of here before 9.
I think if we have a good set agenda, and both the chair and the vice can help, curtail spin-off discussions, you could get it done in an hour.
I think so, too. You should be. I mean, in fairness, I think you should manage your time. If for your
So that's
benefit.
8 o'clock Wednesday?
8 o'clock Wednesday, which, do you want us to peg a second
First.
Wednesday of the month, or it's up to you?
I'm supposed to be at work by 8:30 is all.
Yeah, day before the 4th,
That'd be July 3rd, Mark, for the next.
probably not a good idea.
Be the first Wednesday.
Yeah,
Do we know the rooms available?
We'll find out.
I can find out.
Kathy, you're saying you gotta be at work by 8:30?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty flexible, but
Yeah, the earlier I can get back, the better, so.
Well, maybe in July, you'd probably do it the 10th rather than the 3rd, because.
I think so.
The 4th. Yeah, you can vary, it's not a
Yeah,
big deal,
sure.
Other than that, you can do the first Wednesday of the month, if you want to, as a general.
Let's set the next meeting for Wednesday, July 10th, 7:30.
great, thanks.
I'm on shift that day, so you'll have to.
Is there always coffee and muffins? I didn't know.
No,
Let's make that motion. There's always, Steve always brings coffee and donuts.
Yeah. I do. I charge it at the town, but I do bring it.
Some of you have oaths in the front of the packet I gave you, and I just need those signed this morning.
I would ask you to go over the current waterways ordinance, if you would, just because the more familiar you are with this, the more it's going to help me with questions I have about it. I'll probably be making one quick, I'll ask your advice on something that has to do with inner harbor float inspections. I'm just going to say this, and then you guys can let it meet around for the next meeting. Ever since I've gotten here, it's been a weird thing, because obviously an inner harbor float has two sides and two people that own it. Right now, it doesn't say that you need to have the same inspectors, so a lot of times, one float would have two inspectors, inspector for one side and another inspector for the other. So the inspectors came to me and said, well, do I have to inspect the whole float? What if I just inspect my guy's side in one chain? The north will say that, Tim Galvin came up with this, if you're on that Camden side, then the north, I've got to inspect the north chain and the north block. I don't have to inspect the south block. Now, that actually was going on for a while, and then I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm going to make it so in the inner harbor float agreement, which mean in the appendix, which means it doesn't have to go to vote, or I want to change one thing saying that you need to agree on one inspector.
between the two owners.
between both the two.
Makes sense.
It does make sense, and we'll talk about it more in the next meeting.
Makes sense.
I won't be able to be here on July 10th. I work 24-hour shifts and I'm working that day, but Bob will be here for that next meeting.
We'll take notes.
On the list of names and addresses, et cetera, I'm gonna be changing my email for the Harvard Business, as was recommended in the committee guidelines.
Smart thing to do. Don't have to, I never did.
So
I think
that my personal email isn't subject to scrutiny, should anybody have any reason to do that.
Mark, do you have everybody's email address?
I do.
Okay, we can utilize yours for now and then just.
Yeah,
tell them what the
I'll
new
let
one is.
everybody know what my new address is.
So obviously you'll get an agenda, please, a preliminary agenda for your team, sometime before the 10th, so they can comment and add, subtract anything to the agenda that they may want to. You know the drill. You've done it 1,000 times in the planning board, so, just plan ahead. Just send an agenda to your team and us, what's intended to be discussed on, and if there's any materials that need to be reviewed by the committee beforehand, it saves time.
Just a clarification on, because I think there's often confusion about what's okay to talk about on email and what's not, like in
Yeah.
purposes of planning, sharing information, scheduling, anything like that. It's totally fine to have a group email that you're going back for. It's the making the decisions, deliberation,
Yeah.
that kind of thing over email outside of a public meeting is frowned upon.
Right.
What defines a public meeting? Is 5 committee members on the street corner a meeting?
If 3 people, technically, in this case, if 3 people are standing in the street corner negotiating, discussing what we should do with the harbor ordinance, that is a meeting.
If you guys all run into each other at a party together,
That's no
and you're
problem.
talking about something other than the harbor,
That's
it's
not-
fine. Right. But if, we're in Hannaford and there's 3 of you, a quorum, and you decide to have an impromptu discussion about mooring fees,
Yeah,
then
don't do it.
not good.
So emails that get into any subject should not go,
Right,
period.
right, that's right, it's right. I mean, emails are not a negotiating tool. And that's
Yeah, I guess
what
if you're gonna publicize you're gonna have a meeting,
Of course,
Ahead of time.
of
yeah,
course.
at the grocery store at a certain time, then it'd be okay.
Right, only if it gets put in the paper.
Yeah, that's right.
In the produce section at 9 AM, be there.
That's correct. So anyway, it was a good meeting,
So-
thank you so much.
For our agenda next meeting?
Yeah, well, certainly you have a bunch of
You
bullet
and
points.
Liz are in charge.
In touch.
Yeah, and I think we should adopt and confirm a
Yeah, you
work plan
should.
based on, because I'm happy to
So,
share my
okay.
notes as well.
Yeah, you can share agenda information on, or development on email, that's okay. That's just establishing what you're gonna talk about. But you're not gonna talk about what's on the agenda on email, that's all. It's substitute.
So anybody
Can give you
want
feedback.
items for the agenda, send me an email?
Yep, yep, yep,
And we'll
Yep.
put that together.
yep. And then if you send it out, suggest a week in advance if you could, and whatever. If somebody has a comment, they can comment and say, this is missing on the agenda. I wanna add this on the agenda. That's cool, that's no problem at all.
Now, can I bring something else up? On the Town of Camden Guide,
Yep,
on bullet point number 8, it says, "I am available to each committee for the scheduling of the French conference room."
oh, that's Janice.
Can we like clarify that?
Well, that document was written by Janice, and she is the coordinator of this room schedule.
Right.
She calendars everything in this room.
Right, I understand that, but for future clarification, I mean, this goes out to all the boards, right, or all the
It does,
committees?
Yeah, it does.
So can we just
Depersonalized.
say,
I
yes,
agree, it shouldn't say I am.
Janice is available?
Yeah, exactly.
For-
The assistant town manager is available for it.
Right, and also, who will be responsible for setting up the recording system? for the meeting?
Liz, Liz,
I will be Janice. I'm
She'll
sure.
get this morning, but Liz
Yeah.
will do it.
All right. And is there capability to show graphics in the room?
yes.
And can those then be shown online
Yes.
for the streaming? Yeah, okay.
It's up there and with the computer, yes.
I think if you know you're gonna have presentation or something ahead of time, couldn't coordinate with Liz and Janice, we can make sure it's all set up so you guys can just plug it in and it should be seamless.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
All in favor? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Grab a muffin before you go.